The 124th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Eight up free hand, King writes the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good! Off the ball! Up the river call. Timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina is upset. Number 1, Oklahoma. And ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. First ball. Recovered by Minnie. With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Oh, way to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with that. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul. Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short. Rebound. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions. The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
And that's what it takes when you get into games. You got to compete. Put with your brain, you got to do your work too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. The regular season has come to a close, although it's been a long year for Carolina. The basketball season moved extremely quickly. We are now in what's regarded as the best time of the year. Champ Week is officially underway as Carolina and many teams will now start to compete in their conference tournaments. For the Tar Heels, they finished 13-18, 6-14. 14th seed in the ACC Tournament, the first time they've ever been seeded as the last seed in the ACC Tournament, the first time they've ever had to play on Tuesday in this event since the conference moved to a 5-day field. And Anthony, not the year Carolina expected to have, not the year we wanted them to have. They've now got to do something historic to give themselves any reason to play meaningful basketball past this week.
Well, I think a lot of people will probably look at the game that we just finished up watching last night against Duke and wonder, well, how much momentum does this team really go in with? I still feel like there should be some confidence that this team can make a run. We've kind of talked about it. This is a team that just hasn't given up throughout the entirety of this season, even though there's been multiple times where we looked and said, if we're being honest, we wouldn't really blame them if they did give up and just say, let's move on to next year. This just isn't our year, and they haven't done that. Roy Williams hasn't done that as the head coach, which is something that we all expected. We didn't expect Roy to ever give up. That's the type of coach that he is, and we said it on the way back last night from Chapel Hill. If there's any coach that can do it, it's Roy Williams. I think that he knows what is at stake. If Carolina loses, it doesn't win the ACC tournament, this is a losing season for him, the first for him as a head coach, which is remarkable in and of itself. But I think that he's going to do everything in his power. I think that the kids that are out there are going to do everything in their power. It's just, not only do you play hard enough to win these games, you're also going to have to get a lot of luck in the ACC tournament, because if you're going to win 5 games in 5 days, that's just how it's going to work. Like you said, nobody has ever done it in the ACC, so it's going to be an extremely tall task. But with what we saw towards the end of the season, there is reason to still believe that there is a chance Carolina can do it.
It's a funny position for Roy Williams, for the Tar Heels. They don't, I'm going to say this, and understand what I'm saying. They don't value winning the ACC tournament. That's not a goal whenever they make their goals at the beginning of the year. Their goal is
to regular season is seen as more important in this.
We value winning the regular season over winning the tournament. Unlike, Duke is they've always put the emphasis on winning the tournament because they feel that gets them more prepared for the NCAA tournament. Look where that's gotten in the last couple of years. But now they don't have a choice but to value winning this tournament, because if not, they're not even on the NIT bubble, if there even is such a thing. And so they've now got to go win 5 games in 5 days. They start with Virginia Tech on Tuesday. It'll be at 7:00. Whenever we talk about this season and where the season got away, the losses that really killed Carolina weren't the ones to when you lost at Louisville, when you lost to Duke, when you lost at Florida State. The losses that really doomed this season were the 3 losses at home to start the 2020 portion of the season: Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, and Clemson. But it was also losses at Virginia Tech, where you controlled the game for 37, 38 minutes. They made a couple plays late. You go play a double overtime game and you lose. And that's where Carolina's they've got to improve. You can't lose those kind of games this week or you're done. And I think the thing, when you look at the matchup with Virginia Tech, this is not the same Tar Heel team we saw on the floor back in January. Carolina went to Blacksburg without Cole Anthony. Brandon Robinson missed that game after the effects of the car accident. In that game, Andrew Platek played 47 minutes as compared to Christian Keeling's 8 minutes in that game. You got to remember, that was a double overtime game. So in the 50 minutes played, Christian Keeling only was on the floor 8 minutes. Well, now he's a big part of what Carolina's doing. He didn't have the best game in the season finale at Duke, but before that had scored double figures in 7 straight games, most of them coming off the bench. He's a big part of what Carolina is doing now, and if they're going to make a run in the ACC tournament, he's got to be back to that guy giving you points off the bench. Virginia Tech, at the time, when they beat Carolina, they improved to 14-5 overall, 5-3 in the ACC. There was a chance that, depending on if they got a couple upsets and just got to 500 in the league, would have been a team that was possibly playing in the NCAA tournament. That hasn't happened. They fell all the way down to 16-15, 7-13 overall in the conference. Mike Young still did a good job his first year in Blacksburg and is going to do a good job with that program, but for Carolina, they got a good, favorable start to what's going to be a long trek to get into that Saturday night final.
Yeah, you talk about a team that's really struggling. Look, they've lost 10 of their last 12. But Mike Young is a guy that beat Carolina this year. Of course, beat Carolina when he was back at Wofford. So he's a guy that knows what it's going to take. And for Carolina, I think you bring up a great point, and that was one of the things that I was really going to harp on with this game as opposed to the first time these two teams played. This is a completely different Carolina team than the one that took the floor that night. That was pretty much Garrison Brooks and everybody else. And you talked about how much Andrew Platek played in that game. Actually, 49 minutes in that game, the most of anybody on the team. He came out of the game for 1 minute. That was how thin the team was at the time. And now Carolina's got a little more depth. Again, it's not great, but it looks like Brandon Robinson, barring something shocking, will play, even though he left the game against Duke. Armando Bacot is nowhere near 100%. He's probably more around 50%. But it looks like he's going to try to gut it out, and he'll have a little bit of time here between this game that we just played on Saturday and Tuesday to try to get the ankle back to a spot where he feels like he'll be able to play on at least a pretty good level for the first half of the game. And then it looks like maybe Jeremiah Francis is going to be available if you need him. Which is something that, we just didn't know if we were going to have throughout the end of the conference season. So Carolina, I think that's one of the reasons why you can feel a little more confident. Nowhere near the amount of depth that they've had in previous seasons. But this is still a team that looks completely different from the team that faced this Virginia Tech team the first time. And with Virginia Tech struggles and Carolina having won 3 of their last 4, there's reason to believe that if Carolina comes out and plays the way that we think they're capable of playing, they can at the least get to Wednesday.
Yeah, and there's always that cliche that there is in sports that the next biggest game is, or the biggest game is the next game, or you got to take it one game at a time, one day at a time. And that's how Carolina has to treat this. It's just a one day at a time, one game at a time. And the hardest thing is for Roy Williams is he's got to juggle minutes, because you can't, on one side, if you need to play the guys 37, 38 minutes, then that's what you're going to do to win the ball game. But you're also thinking long road, because you know what you got to do to get in the NCAA tournament. You got to have some guys just to be able to play if you were to get to Thursday or Friday that aren't just completely gassed. Because I've mentioned it, by then you're probably running on just pure adrenaline. You're not going to be 100%. You're just going to be tired, and that's just it's going to be really hard to do what they're tasked to doing. The most notable team we've seen do this is Connecticut, and that team back when Kimball Walker went nuts, that team was in the field. So they didn't have the pressure of having to win 5 straight to make the NCAA tournament. They just got hot, and then they, of course, went on to win the title that year. Completely different situation for Carolina. Some things back that happened in the first matchup. This was another game that Garrison Brooks was the best player on the floor and didn't get rewarded with the win. He had a monster game, 28 points, 13 rebounds, handed out 6 assists, was 11 of 18 from the field. That was probably the first game all year where it was pretty evident that we're just going to give him the ball and live with the result. Like, they just played everything through him. He missed a shot that tried to win the game in regulation at overtime, where they literally just held the ball till 5 seconds, threw it to him, he turned around and took a jump shot. Like, it was – and that's what I think confidence-wise – you knew you had that in Garrison Brooks, but also, like, it wasn't the team basketball, the team offense that we have now. Landers Nolly II, their best player, was big in that win, scored 22 points. Also, they had a guy off, Jordan Cone, Jalen Cone, 13 points. Every time they needed to make a shot, it seemed like he was the one that made the shot. Those are Tech's 2 best players. Cone is a former player from the state of North Carolina, kind of takes this matchup against the Tar Heels personally because he didn't get recruited by Roy Williams. So that's going to be the 2 guys that if you can key on, you've got a pretty good chance to win, because Virginia Tech doesn't have the talent to play with Cole Anthony, Brandon Robinson, Garrison Brooks, arguably probably the second best big man in the ACC right now, and all that. So should we pick the game, or just say this is we're gonna do it, like, because if they win, they play Syracuse.
Right.
So are we going to pick it and then talk about Syracuse?
Well, I wanted to throw out a few notes. You mentioned Landers.
Hang on, you didn't even come in with stats, and now you want to bring up notes?
I got them right here. Yeah, see, you think that I don't come in with these stats, but there is the magic of being able to look these up on other devices that are not a laptop.
It's got to be,
believe it or not.
It's got to be a computer, or it's fake news.
Yeah. Landers Nolly, you mentioned 15.6 per game. Tyrese Radford, the only other guy in double digits, so not a team that scores the ball very well, but a team that defends pretty well, allowing just 66 points, a little over 66 points per game, ranked in the top 100 in the country. So not phenomenal, but not bad. So this is going to be one of those games where Carolina, if Virginia Tech is able to control the pace, slow some things down, and Carolina is not able to make buckets, it's going to be a tough game. If Carolina is able to do what they were able to do against Syracuse, against Wake, where they're able to get their buckets and control the pace of the game, I think that they could win this game without much of an issue because I just don't feel like Virginia Tech right now is playing their best basketball. I mean, you mentioned Jalen Cone. He's averaging 7.9 points per game this season. So since I'm bringing that stat up, he'll probably drop 26, 30 in this game, something like that. But Carolina, I feel like going into this game has a really good chance to get the week off to a good start. And if we're picking the game, I'm picking Carolina over Virginia Tech to begin all of it.
Yeah, I think Carolina wins for obvious reasons that you just stated. This is probably the